I myself, I had a daughter have cancer. I had a wife that had a nervous breakdown. I started drinking, and I wasn't born an alcoholic, but I got to a certain point and I crossed that line. It was never enough. And I had my last drink in 2006, and since then I've dedicated my life to the recovery community in Charleston. So I'm heavily involved in that, and I get to see it from that inside. I go to the funerals, I go to the hospitals, I go to the jail sentencing hearings. So that's the view that I come from. I'm real involved in the recovery community there. There's one of the stories, I only included two of the stories, and I left a link in there too, with one story about Nancy Shipman and her son at 19 dying of an opiate overdose. Is very compelling. And then the other story I put in there was just an interview with the woman who's the director of Charleston Center, which is a real blessing to our community. It focuses on addiction. So I'd just like to tell you what we're doing, and if it can be of some help, of some service to your community. I'm not here looking for anything. I'm here to be of service. If we can give some service, I thought I'd break this down quickly so I can quickly tell you the niche that I'm really in. There's really three major components to the addiction issue as it relates to communities, and it's in our community that it decays so much, it costs so much. I'm sure all of you know people that have died over the years. Most of the deaths from addiction aren't listed addiction. They're listed suicide, they're listed car wrecks, they're listed drownings, heart attacks, strokes. The toll is much, much bigger than we ever hear about. So the three things that I put for purposes of this: 1, prevention; 2, intervention; and 3, recovery. I'm more on the recovery end, but I'm real involved in the community, and there's other people in these other efforts. On prevention, let me just start out with a controversial statement. The war on drugs is lost. Our biggest drug dealers in Charleston, our two biggest drug dealers in Charleston, number 1 is the U.S. Postal Service, number 2 are retirees. There's a lot of people that don't have a lot of money that get pharmaceuticals through Medicare and so forth, and they end up in the hands of kids, sold throughout the schools and so forth. There's people that supplement their income doing that, and that's our second biggest source of illegal drugs in our community. That's coming from the guy who's the head of the DEA. So I did an article on him, and that's coming from his lips. And then the third, it's getting a little better, but all these pain clinics where people can go and they get addicted. And once you get addicted, it's so hard to break that cycle. The difference between me and an alcoholic, so just because you drink doesn't make you an alcoholic. There's most people that drink can drink socially. In fact, I started out that way. I crossed that line at some point. But everybody who does opiates or benzodiazepines gets hooked. So that's one differentiation. The other big differentiation, most of us when we were young, we experimented with drinking, had a few too many drinks, pass out somewhere you should have fallen asleep at, throw up maybe, wet your bed, whatever, and have some regret about that. Well, these drugs that are out there today, these kids take 1 micron too much, 1 grain too much, and they're dead. Kids are going to experiment. They've got no margin of error. We had a margin of error with alcohol and the stuff that was around when we were coming up. So it doesn't get it got publicity for a little while, it doesn't get the publicity, but it's a steady carnage. And how much money do we invest in a child to get them up to high school or college age? $500,000, $1 million a child, it's a huge cost on the community. So the 3 things that we've been focusing on, there is education. We have a group of college students that are sober, and those students go into the high schools, the junior high schools, and speak. And we've been doing that all around the Charleston area now, and that's in the prevention side, trying to educate the kids and let the kids know you're playing with fire. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. We've also got a place in Mount Pleasant called Creighton's House. Creighton is the name of the boy in the story that died. And that's a place for teens that are in trouble that can go that's safe, and they can seek mentoring from people in the community. And people in the community actively help mentor and give them apprenticeships and other things to try to help them. We have every month a community forum where anybody in the community that's interested in goes to the papers and they can come, and there's a couple people talk on the addiction issue in that community. And then every quarter we have a larger event where we have a number of speakers. In about 2 weeks we've got a bridge walking the big bridge in Charleston. And there'll probably be 8,000 to 10,000 people show up for that. So it's a lot of people are reaching out and concerned. One of the big things we have, I don't know if you have it here. If you don't, you guys might advocate for it. But in Mount Pleasant, we've got an amnesty box, they call it. It's right in the foyer of the police department. And you can take your prescriptions. Another way that a lot of prescription drugs, these drugs that are on the street, is you're cleaning people. Come in, clean your house. Somebody takes a third of their medication, they're not an addict. It sits there and it disappears and it ends up in the hands of school kids, it kills kids. So that's, same with any of the benzodiazepines, Valium, any of that stuff's all deadly in the wrong quantities in the hands of kids that don't know what they're doing. So we have that drug amnesty box, and we've taken in hundreds of pounds that the police department burns. So, and that's been promoted widely in our community. Get that stuff out of your medicine cabinet. You know, if you're not using it, get rid of it. It very well could kill somebody, and does kill people. So, so now that's the prevention side. Intervention, we've all known people that hit a problem at some point or another in their life. Interventions, if you're going to do an intervention or try to intervene on somebody, educate yourself. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't work that you think would work. I've done a number of them over the years. Get your family educated. There's Alcoholics Anonymous has a sister program that's been around since the 1930s. It's called Al-Anon. There's meetings at this church, Al-Anon meetings once a week. That's for the families of people with addiction issues, drugs and alcohol, and it's well worth educating yourself. It's a great place to start. I also put in the booklet, there's a resource, a list of resources there, kind of from the area. Now I'm going to kind of get to where we are, and this is the crux of the matter that I'm really here to talk about. Detox and treatment. So detox, when you hear people talk about detox, there's drugs that you can die from in withdrawals. There's other drugs that you don't die from in withdrawals, but there are several, and alcohol is one of them included, that you can actually go into seizures and die, and it happens, you know, with some regularity. The people that try to detox themselves, and then treatment. So in all of our minds, we think somebody goes off to treatment, they get healed, right? Well, that's not the case here. Alcohol and drugs used addictively are not the problem. They're the solution for the person. The person is uncomfortable in their own skin for whatever reason. Maybe they were born that way. Maybe they had a real chaotic childhood. Maybe they had chaotic events in life. Maybe just genetically they're real uncomfortable inside, and they try a drug, and the drug allows them to be present in the moment and allows them to feel alive, and the hook's in. And then it keeps taking more and more and more of the drug to get that same effect, and the drug keeps taking more and more and more from them. And the physical addiction sets in, and you know, the one common saying about that is there's really only three places people end up when they get deep into addiction: jails, institutions, or death, unless they can find a way out. I can tell you from my side of it, about 1 in 30 make it out. That's the cold hard reality. Treatment centers and so forth will try to give you different numbers. That's not the reality. About 3% of alcoholics and addicts make it out. Some hang on and try to maintain, and may hang on for a few years into their 50s or whatever, but the recovery rates are not good. And there's things that can be done to bend that curve. Government money and so forth is mostly towards prevention, a little bit towards intervention and detox and treatment. But when a person comes out of treatment, their journey's just beginning. When treatment, they're just giving them some time away from the drink or drug, trying to educate them a little bit, but this is a mental disease ultimately. And it's going to take time for the mind to heal and start thinking properly without constantly trying to talk the person into reaching out for something to make them feel different. So when somebody's gone to treatment for a month or 3 months, and they come out, everybody assumes that they're okay now. No, they're just getting started. The things that work best long-term are support groups. You've all heard of 12-step programs. There's a lot of 12-step groups. Some of the churches have Celebrate Recovery. There's Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. They're solid programs that have stood the test of time. And a person that will immerse themselves in that community has a good chance. If they really immerse themselves, those groups are focused on resolving the issues that bring the internal discontent. But that still doesn't leave a very good percentage of recovery. What we've been finding, recovery housing is a crucial link. So if somebody comes out of detox, usually by the time somebody's done something to address their alcoholism or drug addiction, everything and everybody is gone. People are sick of them, they've tried for years to get them sober, and they've had all the broken promises and all the lies and all that, and they're alone and they're done, and then they get dropped back off on the streets, coming out of 2 months or a month in a rehabilitation facility. Nobody wants to take a chance on them. They want to give minimum wage jobs, and they've got medical bills through the roof, legal bills through the roof, and they need to get back on their feet. And a lot of times there's child support issues and all other kinds of issues that require money. So you take somebody like that and you put them off and they're by themselves in a little room, renting a room somewhere, and it's just a matter of time until they need to feel a little relief and they pick up the first drink, which leads to whatever their drug of choice is. And make no mistake, alcohol is a drug. It's a very powerful drug. It happens to be legal, but there's still more deaths from alcohol, way more deaths from alcohol in our society than any other. You know, it causes the most carnage. So recovery housing. We've been opening houses called Oxford houses, and it's a unique concept. There's 2,300 of them now. It started in the late 70s. And Oxford houses are rental houses. They're rented from landlords. And each house is set up with a government that the inmates run the asylum. The people coming out of treatment, they might start off being the chore coordinator, they might be the secretary, the comptroller that collects rent, they end up being voted in as president or treasurer. Everything in the house is democratic within the house itself. There's only 3 rules from outside the house. No drinking or drugging, all bills get paid on time, and no disruptive behavior. That model has been working remarkably well. One thing about people in early recovery that is a trait that they all have is there's an incredible defiance. But amongst themselves with that peer pressure, it seems to work. So it's a model that really works. We've got 10 of them open in Charleston now. We're trying to open some in Mount Pleasant. The real estate's a little higher, so it's been a little more difficult. But the reason it works over halfway houses, in halfway houses, people come in and when you get seniority, you get perks in a halfway house. You know, and the longer you've been there, you kind of want to keep other people down so they don't get into your pie, right? But in these houses, the house has to vote somebody in. If somebody wants to get in that house, they have to be interviewed by the house members, and the house members vote if they let them in. And when the person comes in, they share in the bills. So the house has a vested interest in that person's success. Because if that person doesn't succeed, now they've got to figure out how to make up the money for the bills. So it's a model that's been working really well. And I wanted to touch again on recovery support groups, if you're aware of in your community. The great thing about these 12-step recovery groups, they never ask for any money, they're fully self-supporting, they don't promote themselves, they rely on attraction, you never hear any controversy out of them, they're a great thing, they keep their head down, they always pay rent, they won't accept a free space. It's a great model that's worked out, they're a blessing. I've been to some of the 12-step recovery meetings in this community, and you all probably don't see it, but there's a strong recovery community here, so just so you're aware of it. And the last component that we're working on is vocational rehabilitation. And that sounds really fancy for what is actually being done so far. I've been taking guys in, or there's several of us involved, and we've been finding people that will give them apprenticeships and we'll buy them $1,000 in tools or whatever they need to get them on their feet. We've had 8 guys do that in the last year, and 68 are still sober and on a good path. I'm not saying we're going to stay at 75%, but I'm saying that when you address the housing component, where you've got a sober living environment, and then you get people in a stable work environment where they can see light at the end of the tunnel, it really bends that curve to that 3% that's the national average. The way we've been funding this thing, I found in the Library of Congress an 1872 map of Charleston. People have been sponsoring them into the schools. They go into school libraries, and the teachers love them. They make class assignments on them. I just quick pulled up last night and printed a couple of Beaufort, one from 1870s of Beaufort, another one, an old naval map. And then there's an old Civil War map of Charleston I pulled up and printed. But that's the way we've been funding ourselves. One thing about people in recovery, we need to be self-supporting. So when you see giving handouts to people trying to get sober is not what they need, but giving them a hand up is what they do need. And if you're aware of somebody that's trying and they're staying sober and they're trying, be aware and help them in the ways that you can, that you're not just handing them something. Because it's badly needed for that person to get that self-determination, that self-worth that comes from that. So I think I've talked long enough to give you all the gist. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take questions.
What is the average age of your members?
I've seen guys in their 80s who first get sober. I would say most people with alcohol hit bottom and need to get sober in their 40s. I've seen it clear up to their 80s where a person will do something about it. With the opiate issue, people are hitting bottom at 19, 20, 16. The curve is way shortened for those hard drugs. And those hard drugs, the pharmaceutical companies say, okay, we're going to control supply, but as soon as they make a new hard drug, there's people that reverse engineer it, and the formulas are on the street. So, they can say whatever they want, but as soon as it gets in the hands of a good chemist who has bad intentions, that new potent drug is on the street. So they might be talking about they're getting Oxycontin off the streets and stuff now, but there's all kinds of people making it in the labs, and that's pushed that age way down. That's really a problem because, young people experiment, and young people think they're indestructible, and they're up against something that, as I said, there's just no room of error, there's no operating margin. So in the opiate arena in specific, that's pretty young. Alcohol, I would say it's about in their 40s. If somebody's been a lifetime alcoholic, in their 40s, it's to the point that it's taken that dramatic toll on their family, their social, and their physical health to where they're actually in enough pain to do something about it. Yes, sir.
With the proliferation of marijuana and the legalization of it in different communities, do you see that as a stepping stone to the heavier drugs?
I'm not sure. That was never my thing. And it's not nearly as hard of a drug as alcohol. I would say probably the #1 stepping stone drug is nicotine. But for alcohol, now believe this or not, this will sound really funny, but my own observation, I don't have anything scientific with this. See, the liver turns alcohol into sugar, and those kids that are constantly getting a lot of soda and everything else, that sugar rush is very closely related to alcohol. So I would say that all the soda and everything else that gets pumped into kids is probably the gateway drug for alcoholism in a lot of cases. And I would say nicotine is probably the gateway drug because it's closely related to heroin, morphine. It's a narcotic. But everybody has their own journey. So, somebody, if they're in that much discomfort and they want to feel different and they get marijuana, it doesn't make them feel different enough, but that ice has been broken. What else do you have? Yes, sir.
What percent of your people in your program are veterans?
Our veterans? Yeah. So we have a real strong showing of people that are in their 60s right now, that were Vietnam War vets. A lot of them are mentors and so forth, and really a strong showing. One of the gentlemen that's really helped us with this, Colonel Terry Brown, was oversaw the Norwegian front, and then he came here, and he's never been an alcoholic or addict, but in the 1970s he started an AA program here in Beaufort on Parris Island. And that began the treatment program they have for Marines, and that was unheard of in the military circle. I would say that overall membership, my experience of people that have been in the military is probably 15%. But remember, 40% of our membership is also women. I know women are in the military too, but it seems like the percentages are heavier towards men. But I think it probably mirrors about what's in society. But whenever there's a devastating war, there's a big uptick, because a lot of those people come back, and there's all kinds of names, post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever, but they want to feel different. They've got that pain from what they've seen and what has happened to them, and they're looking to feel different. And so, in other words, after the Iraq, and especially the Afghanistan conflict, I've met a number of guys in the Afghanistan conflict that had a lot of emotional trauma from being out there in those mountains and doing what they had to do. So. Yes, sir, Rebecca.
I'm interested
interested in that 3% statistic. Is it a national statistic that only about 3% of those who are addicted either survive it or actually kick it in their lifetime?
So this is something based off of observation.